There we go. So, hello to YouTube. My name is Robert Ernst, president of the Franklin Band, member for about 20 years now. And as promised, we're going to go through and discuss the histrionics of the Franklin Band, go through a lot of different details. We had an outline of different date ranges and topics to discuss, and we had a very special guest. You want to introduce yourself, Linda?
Linda Webb. I was a majorette in the Franklin Band, cymbal player, and band historian, PR person. So I've been in a lot of different areas working with the band for over, well, probably like 60 years now.
Well, I was going to say, because as a point of record, because we had the membership list, and between you and your husband, Rich, you specifically, Linda, had the distinct you joined 1957.
Okay, that's about what I thought. It was 1950s.
Yep, and then later it would be your husband, Rich, joining a year or less later at 1958. So you two are the longest serving members that are still with us some 60 odd years later, almost 65 come 2022.
Yeah.
So there we go. So a couple of production notes for our viewers before we get into it. If you occasionally see me looking over here, I have a second monitor with some notes and some outlines in our documents I'll be looking at. You may see Linda looking down because she has, well, quite the treasure trove, really, of primary documentation as the historian. Just to get an idea, how long had you been collecting records? The whole 65-year tenure, just about?
No, not really, because I was a kid when I started. So
Sure, fair enough.
probably easy 30 years or more.
Mm-hmm. And either collected primarily through you and a family connection, which we will get to, but also, as we were just talking before I hit the record button, people were finding, like either working with you or just finding it on their own. People were sending you ultimately different kinds of documents and photographs and programs and other things.
Right.
Another production note, we are recording it this way to memorialize the state of where we are in this COVID-19 pandemic. Not unlike the worst pandemic 100-something years ago, but the difference is we can conduct conversations this way. So we can record it this way for posterity. It also means any noises from a child that you hear across the way, if the microphone picks that up, that's what it is. We're just going to go with it. So as our shirts say that Mr. Paul Michael Kane designed for us to commemorate our 150th anniversary, the Franklin Band was formed in 1870. Now, this is confirmed. This is not just something that we're putting on t-shirts to look good. So, Linda, let's jump right into it. 1870, what do we know about our origins?
Well, it was recorded in the Sussex Independent. In 1870, the first rehearsal of the band was held in Dunlap's Barn in Franklin, New Jersey. And this is a recollection of Ellsworth Wright, who was also a band member. There were 6 to 8 members, directed by William Rhoda from 1870 to 1872. And that would make the band older than the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, the Salvation Army, and even the Statue of Liberty.
That is fantastic. And I know the one surviving picture that we've used on multiple press releases, a number of programs where we do commemorate our anniversary special, like 100th, 125th, and now for 150th, we have this very special picture that we like to put out there where we actually have members that served in the Civil War for the Union Army posing in a picture. Not, as I understand it, Linda, not in the Franklin Band uniform, anything like that, but just from their old Civil War regular uniforms.
Right.
Just to get an idea of the context of the Civil War and how it led to this. I remember an old director talking about how when these veterans of the Civil War would go home back to their families, they missed being in a regimented routine and especially missed being a regimented band. So the Franklin Band and a lot of other bands across the country started up this way when instruments were really cheap to come by. And just as another point of reference, there is an estimate that was conducted not that long ago that in 1889 there were 10,000 community bands that existed in 1889 all across the country. Of those 10,000, which we are a part of, as well as a few others that are still with us, less than 100 of them have survived and are still active. So we're one of the lucky ones, Linda.
Yes, we are.
Um,
Actually, you mentioned 1889, Rob. I just want to interject there. There
sure.
was a concert band competition with bands from Belvedere and Great Meadows area at a farmer's picnic in Lake Grinnell. And it was reported in the newspaper there were 10,000 spectators. Well, that's quite an audience from back then.
That is quite the audience, especially like when you consider the amount of bands that had to converge in that area. Belvedere is, for record, we are the Franklin Band based in what is now Franklin Borough, New Jersey, in Sussex County. And there's a bit of town history in that, which we will get into in the next decade segment that we have on the outline. But basically, Belvedere is not very close to us, is it? So
No.
we had to travel quite a ways for that band competition. That's all the notes that I had from 1870 to 1900, unless you have other performance highlights to include besides a remarkable competition.
Well, let's see. You want to start in 1874?
Sure.
I have some notes.
Sure.
The band was founded as the Franklin Community Band and was related to the Hungarian Band and the Franklin Miners Band, with whom they alternated playing with at different times. On July 7th, 1874, there was a picnic held at Munson Grove in Franklin, and the Franklin Cornet Band was hired by the Ancient Order of Hibernia to play at this picnic. And it was reported in a local newspaper that the Franklin Band's music was superior to similar bands that had been in existence. And 1880, jumping a few years here, Jonas Woods, as a member of the Franklin Band, with John, James, and Daniel Tiedeback as members of the Union Army. So they are in that Civil War picture that we have of the band. In 1884, the band had participated in political rallies both in Deckertown, which I believe now is Sussex, and Hamburg.
Yes, it is.
In 1888, Jonas Woods started a band in Hamburg, since there were supposedly no Franklin Band from 1902 to 1911, but there's no record of that time frame to verify that. Hamburg, Sussex, and Newton each had their own band. In 1911, the band rehearsed in the Zinc Company furniture store and later at the neighborhood house, both on Main Street in Franklin. March of 1913, Franklin became independent of Hardyston, and the Franklin Fire Department was organized in 1913, and the band marched with the fire department at that time and has since been performing with them at local parades since 1913. 1914, the Franklin Theater opened, and the Franklin Furnace Band, as it was called back then, played concerts before the opera productions. 1916, the band marched in the Citizens Preparedness Parade in Manhattan as we prepared to enter World War I. 1917, Robert Catlin recruited Stephen Bendis, that's my grandfather, a Hungarian bandmaster, to start a band in Franklin. There was also a dance band called the Clover Club Dance Band, made up of some of the Hungarian band members, which he had started, and also the Franklin Boys Band, which he started in 1937. They paraded for the Hamburg Fire Department, and these bands were all feeders into the Franklin Band because everybody played with different groups together. The Boys Band disbanded during World War II when it began because most of the boys joined the armed forces, including Bendis' both his sons John and Stephen and longtime band member Richard Miller, who later served as treasurer of the band. Mm-hmm. There was also a problem at that time getting to rehearsals due to gas rationing. 1918, the band played for the dedication of Schuster Park, known today as the Fireman's Park. Mm-hmm. They had weekly concerts there with people honking their car horns after each number that was played by the band. Rather than clapping hands, they tooted their car horns.
And I had to speculate because it reminds me of the recent concert we did with people in the cars tooting their horns, because 1918, in recent memory, 1918 has come up a lot because, of course, that was the Spanish influenza epidemic at that time. So I have to imagine that a combination of people being in the park and people in the cars has to be a relic from that time where people were aware and were just being cautious of the
Right.
pandemic at that time as well.
So the fire department and the band relied on the town for financial support. So together they worked on fundraisers. July 2nd of 1918, they held a concert at the Schuster Park with 8,000 people in attendance, and they split the proceeds 50-50. Regular financial support stopped from the town in 1980 and also seized storage and rehearsal facilities. The band now has storage, as you know, at the senior center and
Mhm.
rents a storage facility and rehearses at Walker Valley High School and the American Legion Post in Franklin.
Mhm.
1922, a bandstand was erected at Schuster Park by the town. It still remains today, but is too small to accommodate the band. In 1968, the town built the band pavilion down at the Franklin Pond. 1923, the band performed a concert at Sussex County Fair in Branchville, and it has continued to do so at their larger facility. 1931, the band was the only active band in Sussex County.
And I had to interject
1939,
thinking about 1931. That has to be a sign of the Great Depression really taking a toll on
right,
everybody there. Where we went from the Hungarian Boys and a whole bunch of other bands in and around our immediate area down to just the Franklin Band.
just the one. In 1939, some of the Franklin band members started the Miners Band, led by Lou Riggio of Franklin, because Franklin had a semi-pro football team and the band played at their games.
Mhm.
Franklin Band pre-existed any instrumental programs in schools. The exposure to instruments was thanks to the Franklin Band, who enticed students to join on their own. One such student was John Musty Postash, who was a self-taught clarinetist. After he heard the band perform, he wanted to join and be part of the band. He practiced in his barber shop, and when Stephen Bendis, my grandfather, heard him play, he had him join the Franklin Boys Band. Stephen Bendis started and directed the boys band after the Franklin Band ceased due to the war. He was also asked by the Zinc Company to come to Franklin to start a brass band. He started and directed many bands in the Passaic area, and once moving to Franklin, he started the boys band in 1937 and the Hungarian band. These bands were training programs for students besides being performing bands. Big events for the students in Franklin was Field Day. The band paraded through town with all the students to the athletic fields before the start of the event. 1954, the Zinc Company left Franklin as the ore ran out in the mines. They had contributed numerous times to the purchase of uniforms for the bands in town. 1956 era, the band had been all male members, but the first female joined the band. Prior to that, the only female was the majorette, myself. And I rode in the car with the parade marshal while the male members rode on a bus to the parades. By then, we had a school bus that one of the band members drove. Albert Salibi was the president of the band at that time, and Doug Van Riper was also an officer of the band and drove the band to parades in the school bus. 1960, the band purchased new uniforms to replace those hot black wool uniforms. And then later, for the bicentennial, they bought the gray pants and red jackets. And they were purchased on a bank loan. In 1968, the gray pants were replaced with the royal blue with the gold stripe down the side. 1975, besides having over 800 trophies at the Historical Society Museum in Franklin, two major honors were bestowed on the famous award-winning Franklin Band. One being designated at New Jersey's Firemen Convention Band after winning first place in the parade for 8 years in a row, thanks to the pride, talent, and dedication of the band members. The band started marching with Ogdensburg and Fire Department in Wildwood in 1975. There was a banner made depicting this honor and was carried in many parades. Many of these trophies were displayed in the town hall on Main Street until it was renovated, and then they were moved to the Historical Society Museum on Main Street. The second honor was being asked to perform at the Battleship New Jersey in Camden, New Jersey for two major events there. The way that happened, I'm going to have to skip ahead a little bit there.
Sure.
A former band member and professional trumpet player, Jason Webb, our son, heard through his music industry connections of a need for a marching band to provide music for two events at the Battleship. Jason, of course, thought of the Franklin Band and hand-delivered a video a CD, and the anniversary booklet to the entertainment company in Philly. They were impressed with the information he provided and hired the band for both events. The band was honored to perform at the Battleship, New Jersey for the retirement party of Naval Captain Hohenstein, who was so impressed with the band that he invited the band to his celebration banquet. I remember that. The band performed again in June of the same year for a birthday party of writer Tom Clancy, author of Patriot Games and The Hunt for Red October. The band performed on the pier next to the battleship while over 125 invited guests arrived. Special guests included retired Secretary of State Colin Powell, Steven Spielberg, Sean Connery, and a member of the royal family. Tom Clancy came out on the bridge of the ship several times just to listen to the band perform as his guests arrived.
I do remember that. And on top of that, not only being able to see it in person, but in, I forget what paper it was, but there was a group picture of the band as well as one of the pictures of Clancy overlooking the deck when he was just coming out to the deck to listen to us.
To listen.
Mm-hmm.
In 1976, I have to go back a little bit here. 2 record albums were made to celebrate our nation's bicentennial under the leadership of Walt Hunter. He was instrumental in recruiting new band members, and it was his idea to have 2 indoor concerts a year, and he had signs approved by the town that were placed under Welcome to Franklin signs stating home of the award-winning Franklin Band. Those signs deteriorated and were never replaced, unfortunately. In 1977, the band played a concert at Orange Plaza Mall in Middletown, New York, where the Budweiser Clydesdale horse team and wagon performed as the band played. The band also performed at the Playboy Club in Vernon, which is no longer there, for the Kiwanis Convention that was held there. I don't know if you remember any of those dates, Rob?
Not all of them. I just remember from the 76 with the Bicentennial album that we recorded 2 records back then. We recorded the Bicentennial album, and 2 years before would be the first, to my knowledge anyway, the first audio recording, which was the final album recorded in 1974. The audio of which for both are available on our YouTube page, and not for what it's worth, but for my own ears, they hold up really well musically.
Yes, they did. Okay, there's been a number of generations of band members and numerous marriages through the band, 7 that I can relate off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
And the pride carries through, including our family. I started as a majorette in the 50s when there were no females, and we went to the parades in cars before Doug Van Riper drove us by the bus. I met my husband Rich through the band. He had rejoined after serving in the Air Force, and he became president of the band after the death of Walt Hunter. Rich was also business manager, uniform manager, refreshment manager, and he held those positions from 1980 to 2005. Both of our sons grew up with the band. Darren started playing the bass drum and then ended up playing baritone horn. Jason started as a banner carrier as a little kid. Then he went to cymbals, snare drum, and then trumpet, which he has made into his career.
And I have to say for Jason, what's special about him joining when he did, there's something special that you and Rich had made for him, if you want to talk a little bit about that. The special uniform for him when he was how old?
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, we had to take an old band uniform that was getting worn in the knees and whatever, and we had a seamstress make this little tiny band uniform for him when he played the cymbals.
And he would have been how old?
Oh, gosh, maybe 8. He was real little.
Yeah.
And Jason made that trumpet his career. He could play by ear when he was 3, stand up on the back of the couch and play his trumpet.
Yeah, it is interesting. And we'll get back to the 80s, but one theme that I hope comes across this Franklin Band Historia is that you have a sense of the real family band. You have quite a few families make the Franklin Band their home, and it's a band of families, really. Like earlier, you had Linda, you were just talking about how you had a grandfather going way, way back, and
Right.
having a hand in quite a number of community bands back then. And it continues with you and Rich down to Jason and Darren. And one of the recent Memorial Days within the last 5 years, Jason's own daughter came and wasn't able to march the parade, but was able to make it to the end to play with the Franklin Band at one of the memorial services. So by my count, Linda's grandfather and then Linda, Jay's 5 generations, and
Probably.
right off the bat there. And there's certainly other bands too, and all kinds of musicianships from amateurs that didn't know a note from a dot on a piece of paper to people that got their start in the band and went on to be professional musicians. Jason is a professional musician, play with national orchestras. We've had a few other members that have done that. Our current vice president, Marissa Wasinski, would go on to West Virginia University to be a marching mountaineer, had the honor to be a part of the Wind Symphony that made their debut performance at Carnegie Hall, as well as to march in the Macy's Day Parade in New York City with the Mountaineers. And basically for every musician that's an amateur and plays for fun, we can count another one that went some kind of higher amateur or professional route with it, whether it's them, John Salibi's another one, and quite a few others. Right. But I am curious about, well, with the Wildwood, just to give you an idea of how strong that legacy is. So the Franklin Band makes their legacy throughout the 70s. And right. You get the special banner, we get the special awards. We just performed, for the record, this is being recorded in the end of the summer 2021. We just did a service a couple months back at the High Point Memorial for the Veterans with one of the new members that had joined us, who previously had been a member of another band some 20 odd years ago. And when he would march in Wildwood, even 20 years ago, murmurs, even when we hadn't gone, and we hadn't been for some time, murmurs of the legend of the Franklin Band still permeate in Wildwood, even if we personally have not gone there. So right. We certainly left our mark. With the 80s...
Everybody knew when the Franklin Band was coming because they knew the music and they could hear them blocks away. Said, "Oh, here comes that Franklin Band."
Mm-hmm. One thing to know that with the 80s, and it does lie into, unfortunately, with Ripper's passing and Rich taking over, but other members joining in, and you see these dips and rises of membership coming and going, things like that, and we keep going. One thing that sticks out in the 80s is, unless something comes up, and if someone has, we'd love to see it. I mentioned how 1974 is the earliest known audio recording of the Franklin Band. We never got into wax cylinders or anything like that I'm aware of. Very expensive to do even at that, I think. But also 1986, to my knowledge, would be the first video recording of a Franklin Band concert. 1986, recorded by Linda Webb, actually, just by coincidence there. And I had my own highlights from that concert, but Linda, you were there. Anything you want to share special about that concert?
In 86?
Yes.
The band was big at that point. Very big. And I'm going to have to check to see if I have any prior video recordings of the band concerts.
Would love to see.
I'll check that out for you. Because they were on 8-track at that time.
Sure. And VCR recording machines that are about half the size of the largest painting behind Linda, really. Like you've had to carry it over your shoulder to record and things like that.
Yeah.
But that was director Lee Moody's debut, who was a band teacher at that time. Was he a band teacher in the area before going to Butler, or anything you can share about that?
I don't think he wasn't local in Franklin, this area. I'm not sure where he taught, but I know it wasn't right here.
Okay. Some other highlights.
Although his wife though, she taught in Wantage, and Nancy Moody, and she that was one of the marriages in the band, and she directed for a short time in between there too, when as an associate director.
Mm-hmm. Directors and associate directors. We have a list of the directors. And I believe we published it on our Facebook at one point, and we've updated it since, of course. And pretty impressive that there's only 2 known gaps in our early history. But at any rate, with that 1986 concert, a couple of highlights that were shared to me, both just by watching the video and another just by getting confirmations from one of the musicians that I keep thinking of her as Holly Hunter, but it is Holly Bradley because yet another Franklin Band marriage right in
Yep.
there. But she confirmed a couple things. One is that she still had the program and was able to confirm so I could give credit when I uploaded the concert for Light Cavalry, the clarinet soloist, was Judy Gutlerner. And it's a Franklin name that a number of people would recognize because she was a music teacher at Franklin Borough School and would ultimately be my music teacher when I would go
Oh
there,
my gosh.
ultimately, until she retired not long before Franklin School's 100th anniversary. So she's certainly been a figure there as well. So she got the credit there. Another one who absolutely has an imprint from very early years up to the 80s. And what the 1986 concert has is the debut performance of Anthony or Tony Galazzo's piece, Franklin Tops Them All.
Right.
And I remember asking you, Linda, leading up to uploading that video off camera months ago, and I tried to contact people since, but as far as we can figure, we have no idea the precipice for Franklin Topsonwall, whether it was to dedicate it to the town, to the band, fire department, anything like that. And if it's all of the above, okie dokie. But we know that he wrote it in even as Lee Moody points out in the video, he wrote it in the 50s, debut performance sometime later, and thank you, Linda, for the presence of mind for turning the camera to recognize Tony Galazzo. But what kind of the legacy did he have on the band at that time? Because he's a character on its own right. What did he do, first of all?
I don't know what he did, if he was a teacher, in a school system or what, but he gave private lessons because my brother Jeff had, I believe, guitar lessons from him. He taught piano too, but I don't know if he ever played with the Franklin band. I have no idea about that. But he was, he was from Franklin.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only from Franklin, as I understand it, if people local to the area know where the Franklin School is, you have Washington Avenue, and there's that other street that shoots out. That's where, at that time, a lot of the teachers used to live so that they could live where they teach.
Right.
And if I remember correctly, that's where Tony lived to give those private lessons, not just to Jeff, but quite a few members during that time, ultimately. So he certainly has a legacy stretching decades there. And even if not an official member of the band, he certainly had in kind of a stamp in that way, both with the people he taught music to and in our library, which has about 1,000+ pieces of music. He's in there.
That's right.
And
he's
so
part of the legacy.
He absolutely is. And I'm just thinking, like, going through, seeing what's covered, seeing what's not. And we covered quite a bit in a quick amount of time, but we do have the documentation to confirm not only our earliest parades with the fire department, but also right around 1920 and 1921 is like similar to how 1913 was the start of the Franklin Band and the Franklin Fire Department being together, really.
Right.
In a similar way, 1920, 1921 is when the Franklin chapter, Post 132 of the American Legion, where they're explicitly tied to us as well, because when they started Memorial Day parades that they would start, we were there, and we've been parading with them and doing various things for them since. And likewise, we had leaned on them support over the years, whether for rehearsal space, mainly for rehearsal space, really. And that's the 1980s. 1990s, that is, in my mind, where we have Ron Bobiak ultimately getting in at the end. I don't really have any memory of Pete Aker. I was only born in 89, so of course not. Rich Barriers, I know, was a lower elementary school music teacher at Franklin. And then, of course, Ray, like Mr. Barriers had to go, and we had a longtime member and director Ray Aspinwall step in, and then we got the Bobiaks, and we had the rest of the director list. And the Bobiak years, because he's been a director almost 10 years, and that's when I joined. So I was there for the last Wildwood parade that we did, which was my first parade, which if anyone's watching has done any kind of parading and knows about these parades, whether it's Wildwood or the Ridgewood Fourth of July parade, anything like that, Wildwood, to my knowledge, is one of the it's flat, but it's one of the longest parades you can do, 3 or 4 miles,
3 miles.
if I remember
Yep.
correctly. And that was my first.
That's a good way to break in.
For sure. Also in 2000s, we talked about the Battleship New Jersey. We've had quite a few members right around that time when the September 11th attacks happened. First of all, right after that, I forget the exact timing of when, but there was a service held at Skyline Stadium not long after. I wasn't in it yet, but my brother was in the band for that, where it was basically together as America, because that's how it was at the time, and also show support for the troops as they were getting ready to go into
Right.
Afghanistan at that time, because it was late 2001. And then we would ultimately have members, Dylan comes to mind, but others with him as Iraq, Afghanistan, other kinds of places. So the role of having members be active in the military or come back as veterans certainly is a theme that you see, whether it's the Civil War, either of the World Wars. Rich, if I remember right, he was Korean War?
No, that was Vietnam.
Vietnam, okay. And we've had quite a few Vietnam veterans join us for that. And now we're getting Iraq and Afghanistan veterans with us. And then, of course, 2000s, you can't not ignore the current pandemic that we're sitting here in this situation where we, as Linda alluded to, we rehearsed at Wacom Valley High School, and we had to do the shutdown in March of 2020. And of course, as soon as restrictions were able to lift where you could do outside rehearsals, we were ultimately allowed to rehearse at the Franklin Pond underneath the bench shell that you talked about that they built. And we are very fortunate to keep going and to also be continuous, because there are two words with the Franklin Band when you talk about history, that we are the oldest, and we also say that we are the continuous. Those are the key words. A lot of other groups too, Linda, they link those two words together, where it's in Pennsylvania and other states. But any band that can do that, it's very, very special indeed. We continued.
Sure.
So we continued after the Civil War. We continued. If you're talking about that 1918 concert where cars were honking in the horn, or they were in the cars honking their horns to applaud,
Right.
that is exactly how, and you were there, Linda, that's how
Yes.
our recent summer concert went, with people outside spaced apart, or they were just in their cars.
Right.
Right at the Franklin Pond.
History repeats itself.
So a lot of marriages, a lot of deaths in the family, and we all support each other with greetings cards there. And a lot of families in the band, children, that gets quite a few. Someday I'll probably have one rise up as well. And
That's for sure.
Exciting. But we have it all here, and throughout the video, you probably saw me edit in a number of source pictures from the different decades that were talked about, a sample of flyers and news releases that I'll also edit in. Just looking back, we covered quite a bit, as Samuel does a little call out there.
He's cheering us on.
Wow. I can't think of a whole lot. Like, is there anything you want to add, Linda, to any of this to be recorded for posterity?
Well, the band has always been a family, whether it's blood family or family of friends and neighbors, and the love of music. And I think that's what keeps the band going.
Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't be surprised, actually, I've already seen this. And I wouldn't be surprised if any old members, if you were able to see it. Because right now, we talk about these periods of times where we have low numbers of memberships, either in the parade band or the concert band. And either way, the more the merrier. Or you have periods where we have large numbers. When I was in it, gosh, like Linda, you and Rich were right in the thick of it too when I first joined. We had concert band alone now, 50, 60.
Right. And down in Wildwood, we had 42 in Wildwood marching. And then there's always more in the concert band.
Mm-hmm. And that is also in the 60 to 70 something that's listed. Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that we are seeing, and the more the merrier, so if anyone is in or around Sussex County, New Jersey, and you're seeing this, link is in the description. Look us up on Facebook for where we're rehearsing. Come out and join us, whether we're, and just have a good time. Whether you're a 12 or 13-year-old, bring, have your mom and dad drive there, or if you're an elderly person, come and make your music. Because in that roller coaster of low and high numbers over the years, we just came from a low and now we're getting to a high. Not that long ago, we were only at about 25 in the concert band and less than 10 in the marching band. And now we're increasing to more than 10 in the marching band. But now, because of the pandemic and people wanted to play more and taking it up when they were in quarantine, as people would write to me and tell us, we've had at least 20 people join that low point. And of those 20, at least 10 specifically joined during from the lockdown March 13th of 2020 to now. That's where those 10 fit in.
That's good.
And I already got word that we'll have more join us come September when we start up rehearsals again. And that will be an exciting time. And it's a real family band. And something else to say, speaking of the whole family band, I'm doing this on my own time, away from temporarily ignoring my family, but something to bring up. And it's a model that I thought wasn't special, but I guess it is apparently. That Linda, apparently not all community bands operate the way we do, in that every single person volunteers their time.
Right.
Everybody volunteers, not just the members volunteer their time. I volunteer my time as president, and other people do as different officers. We even have a specific person volunteers their time for contracts. Linda volunteers to keep the archive up to date as best as she can. So nobody is paid to do what we do, and that's pretty special. I remember hearing about when one of the directors left, he had mentioned how in a different orchestra that he conducts, he is paid a stipend. We don't do that.
Right.
Nobody gets
just
paid.
For the love of music.
Exactly. It's all a good time, and any money we do raise goes to a couple ways. It's either to repair the equipment, pay for storage facilities. It's a shame that we have to, but we have to pay for new music purchases to be relevant. And the last concert proved that, as for the first time in my memory, we played music from streaming service shows, that Mandalorian piece. Before that, it would be like, we don't have music we have some music that's new and still relevant, where there's John Williams, but that last concert we did was the first time we played music from something that streams only on the internet. So it is interesting how we keep with the times, Linda, because music-wise, we have music going back, war songs or old novelty songs from late 19th, early 20th century types. And then when you look at the library that's acquired, you can certainly see when whoever the director was decided to buy something new to stay relevant, when they buy a new musical medley for Sound of Music or something like that, when they bought it in the 60s or 70s, or when they buy something from the 80s or 90s, and we're still doing that.
I'm still making history.
Absolutely. And it is interesting because anniversary in 2021, so we're technically 151, but what can you do? But it is fortunate that we've been able to keep going. And when we couldn't keep going outside because it was too cold, we were very fortunate to use the American Legion to do inside rehearsals to get out of the cold in the winter of 2020, 2021, and record our first virtual concert. And we had a lot of great volunteers to help us do that, from regular members that just join and help set up to band parents that help with the recording. So if there's anything that you see, and it's probably not unique to this band, but what makes community bands, especially like the Franklin Band, special is that it's a real family band, and it's made up of all kinds of families. I don't have anything else to add. Linda, do you want to make any kind of last closing statement to say goodbye to YouTube?
Just come on out and join the band. Everybody's welcome, no matter what your status is as far as your musicianship. It's a great time, and just be part of the legacy.
Absolutely.
Actually, some members joined just because of the history of the band. They were very interested and they joined the band. So keep coming out.
Absolutely. And they just want to be a part of the great legacy that we continue to make in all kinds of
Right.
different ways. And if you are interested, there's information about how to do that, how to get in touch with us, our email, our Facebook page, etc. And with that, hope everyone enjoyed this video highlighting Franklin Band, a lot of primary source documentation that we referred to and that you saw on the screen. And hope everyone has a good rest of their day.